Hello everybody, I'm Tessa Shepperson and I'm delighted to be here today with Dave Princep. Dave's been doing a lot of webinars and information for our Landlord Law service, so I thought it would be great to talk to him about his background and his work. So Dave, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about where were you from originally?
I was from the West Midlands. In South Staffordshire, got a degree in environmental health from Birmingham, and then got a law degree subsequently to that. Worked in several authorities in the West Midlands, doing general environmental health officer work, which was my initial.
What interested you and what attracted you to that sort of work?
Well, I think the variety of it really, because I've worked in all areas of environmental health, which covers health and safety, food hygiene. I worked for food hygiene for many years. Then did training around health education, and then subsequently did housing. And it was the variety of the work which really attracted me to begin with, whereas most professions you're in one area generally. It is so vast. You're dealing with commercial premises, residential premises, industrial premises.
Right. So what does your job actually involve then? I mean, So to start with, I mean, when you first started working in environmental health, what were you doing then?
Well, when I first started, going back a few years ago, basically environmental health is a local authority responsibility, and they would divide each borough up into areas, and you would probably have responsibility for all areas of environmental health in those districts. And subsequently to that, because the legislation got more complicated and the requirements got more complicated, then they used to specialise into different areas. So
what would you actually do then on a day-to-day basis?
Well, it depends. If I was doing food hygiene, then I would respond to food complaints. People would make a complaint, or complaints about restaurants, hygiene, but also a lot of the time then was spent dealing with general routine inspections of restaurants, hotels, butchers, etc. On the district side, when it comes to residential, you would deal with complaints. Neighbours' complaints at one time were very common. Noise is an area which I was involved in, used to manage a team of noise officers.
So what did you do with that then? How would that work? So someone would complain about the noise, and what you go out and monitor it, would you, with a level or something?
Well, that's right, yes. Initially what would normally happen then is you would just try informal action. You would write, say, look, we've had a complaint to the person who's being complained about. Anonymously, we wouldn't say who complained that these issues. If we got subsequent complaints, then we would have to go out and monitor it. I certainly spent time managing and supervising a night noise team where we actually went out till 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, right, yeah.
Both in the West Midlands, we would go out with the police. They would call us out if there was a noisy party, and then we'd monitor it and serve notice there, and subsequently prosecute if they didn't turn it down. And in the London area where I have also worked, 2 officers would go out and we'd try and deal with it ourselves, again asking them to turn it down. If they didn't turn it down, then we'd serve notice on them and prosecute them ultimately.
Because when I first met you, I think you were with Camden, weren't you? What were you doing there?
Yeah, well, I worked in the West Midlands, and then I went and worked for the Bermudian government doing environmental health there.
Oh, Bermuda, eh?
Yes,
sounds Hawaiian shirts and straw hats.
It was very pleasant, and used to have to go out on the boat around the island doing water sampling.
Oh, well, someone's got to do it.
Yeah, inspecting these cruise ships, you know, the food hygiene. It was hell. Hotels, we inspected those as well. So that, and then I came back and worked in Camden, and there I sort of specialised more into the housing and noise side. So I originally started as a principal officer, then became operations manager, and acted up to head of service over the private rented sector.
So what would you do then? So someone would call you out if they were perhaps a tenant unhappy about their property, maybe?
Yeah, initially a lot of the complaints were about housing conditions. You know, a tenant would say, oh, there's a problem with my property and the landlord won't do anything. Sometimes you'd have you'd have a neighbour complaining about noise from a property and the conditions, the rubbish in the garden, so we go and inspect it and take action under the management regulations and under the Housing Act. A lot of disrepair took place then as well, so that was basically what we did. A little bit of programmed work where we would go and look at areas and take action in smaller areas, but a lot of it was sort of reactive, where they would make a complaint and we would go and deal with that. And then subsequently I managed the team as well.
So you also set up the London accreditation. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. We're going back about 15 years. Myself, as manager in Camden, I had contacts with quite a lot of other managers in London boroughs, and the authority decided to set up an accreditation scheme, and they tried one in the past and it hadn't worked very well. So I spoke to colleagues in other authorities and I thought, well, why don't we set up a London-wide scheme instead of having individual ones?
Yeah.
And instead of just looking at actually accrediting people on the condition of their properties, asking them to provide X, Y, Z structurally, we would look at training the landlords. And so we became the first scheme, the London scheme, that would actually accredit people in a region. So once you were accredited, you were recognised in all boroughs in London, but also by giving the landlords the knowledge to run the business. And so it's a full day's course, and it's basically the basis now of all landlord training that is carried out on a one-day basis, and it's half of the time is dealt with property standards and another half with management. How to deal with tenants, how to set up tenancies, etc. And it's been very, very successful. Much more successful, I think, than a lot of people thought. And also other authorities in the southeast have also joined the scheme. And I think they've got about almost 20,000 landlords now.
Gosh, that's a lot.
Yes, which must have well over 150, 200,000 properties under management, because there's some very large landlords. But it's very successful, and the satisfaction level from the landlords is very high as well. And I think one of the problems is the law is so complicated and changing, and the number of times you will read an article on the blog, or on not your blogs, yours are very good, but on a lot of articles that you Google, and unfortunately they're 2 years out of date, and if you followed that you'd be in real trouble. So we obviously give up-to-date information, and it's been very well received by landlords and agents.
So what are you doing now then? What's your current
Well, for
work?
the last 10 years I've been an independent housing consultant, and I've spent quite a lot of time helping the RLA, Residential Landlords Association. I was on their policy team for many years, dealing with policy issues and accreditation as well. They had their own accreditation scheme, and also doing training as well. And I still do some training for the Residential Landlords Association, but also completely independent of them, I've been an expert witness in housing cases, dealing with disrepair, representing landlords, agents and tenants, when that action for counterclaims and disrepair have come about, and also to deal with health and safety issues. I've worked over the last 5 years many months of the year abroad, inspecting hotels for one of the large travel companies, to make sure that the properties are safe water-wise and property condition, fire, and so yes, it's been quite hectic.
You've got quite a few air miles, I suspect.
Quite a few air miles, yes. Yes, certainly more than I probably wished for towards the end. There's travelling and then there's travelling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us up to date.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dave, for
thank you.
telling us, and thank you for watching.